On this episode of the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, we look at Chuck Mangione's album Feels So Good as a document of the late 1970s. Everything is a Primary Source is now on Teachers Pay Teachers with ready-to-use lesson plans, activities, and assessments incorporating, you guessed it, primary sources of everyday life from the last 200 years. With several free resources and everything else $5 or less, you'll be able to enhance your social studies curriculum with deep-cut documents of the past quickly and affordably. Look up Everything is a Primary Source on Teachers Pay Teachers to browse the collection. Welcome to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the show where we navigate history through popular culture. I'm your host, Eric Salmonson. I'm a social studies teacher, historian, and pop culture enthusiast. Each episode, I sit down with everyday people to discuss the media, objects, places, and events that shape us and reveal what they say about the past, as well as who we are now. The Everything is a Primary Source podcast is, therefore, your history, my history, our history through popular culture. Glad to be joined right now by Anne at the New Hampshire Council for Social Studies Conference. And from my table, you immediately spotted my copy of Chuck Mangione's Feels So Good.
I did.
What was it about this that drew your eye to it?
Well, I probably still have that LP, and yours is in much better shape than mine is. For a high school band kid in the 1970s, Chuck Mangione was the person for both marching band and jazz band, and we all devoured all of his recordings throughout high school.
What was it about his sound? Because, I mean, would we classify him as jazz? Is it jazz music that
Yeah. He was jazz because the jazz band always played his stuff, too. But,
and so, no words, right? He doesn't sing. It's all instrumentals?
No, although I think Children of Sanchez, doesn't that have lyrics with it? Or is it, I can't remember, all instrumental. The lyrics may have been added later, but I don't recall for sure.
So I can say my real connection to Chuck Mangione is just references to him in other pop culture media, most notably King of the Hill, where he's a character on that. He's the spokesperson for their version of Walmart, Megalomart, and appears on it a few times. And then they mention him on Friends in one episode, and and then of course my in-laws all live in his hometown of Rochester, New York. So he's kind of celebrated in Western New York as, you know, a local boy done good kind of thing. But my real knowledge of his music pretty much ends with the title song.
So, I mean, he was really popular everywhere. We were in Iowa, so, you know, we had no connection whatsoever to Rochester, New York. And I think it was our band director was a trumpet player, and it was the use of the flugelhorn and how unique that was, and that sound of the flugelhorn. So even our marching band had flugelhorn players. All our French horn players played flugelhorn. And I think that was the attraction for us.
What is the flugelhorn as compared to a French horn? Or
so the flugelhorn is like a bigger trumpet. The size of it is bigger, and the sound is much more mellow. And it has a very distinctive sound timbre, where the trumpet is, what do you want to say, sharper or brighter or brassier, where the flugelhorn is much softer. And French horns are hard to march with, right? So the French horn players went over to flugelhorn because the sound was closer, I guess, to French horn than trumpet would be.
And you could probably play a lot more modern sounding music with a flugelhorn. Because you said like a mellower sound.
Yeah, it's much mellower.
So it almost sounds like the music of his era, of the 70s.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you think about other people from that era, but I think it was the uniqueness of using the flugelhorn, and then the kind of jazz music that's closer to pop. I mean, it's not pop music, but it's on the spectrum getting closer to pop music than but jazz, and it's a really good, attractive sound, I think, in the 70s for high school students.
Was there, outside of your marching band, were there other Chuck Mangione
Oh yeah.
People that liked playing his music.
Yeah. So at jazz concerts and jazz contests and things, you'd often hear Chuck Mangione music. I mean, I think he was a real idol for 1970s, early 70s, late 70s band kids.
Well, it's kind of like, so I imagine, music, especially if you are either playing it yourself or playing the record or the channel that you on the radio that you set your dial to, usually has something to do with your own personality, your own interests, your identity, right? You're not going to turn it to the rock and roll station if you're not. And in that time period, rock and roll was getting much heavier and harder. And I can picture somebody in their muscle car blaring not Chuck Mangione, but maybe like Black Sabbath or something like that as their identity. And I remember, so I was in high school in the 90s, and I remember in the late 90s there was a huge wave of ska music was coming back. And ska had started in the 60s, and then it came about in the end of the 70s again, and a little bit in the 80s, but it was like third wave. And a lot of those ska bands had horn sections. And so kids who played the brass instruments, who up until this point were pretty much kept out of pop music. I mean, like Tower of Power in the 80s might be an exception to that. They were on a lot, like they played for Aerosmith and they had their own albums. But most of the time, if you played a brass instrument, that was usually resigned to Sousa marches and a little bit of, like classical type stuff. But now it's in pop music.
Yeah.
Do you think the same thing was happening 20 years before with Chuck Mangione? He's now on the radio, maybe not everybody's radio, but you could relate and therefore even aspire.
Yeah, it's interesting because for me, then I went on to become an ethnomusicologist, and maybe this was one of my early introductions to different sounds, even though it was from the European tradition. Thinking back, maybe this was one of my early indications that I might like and appreciate music from other cultures, because the flugelhorn wasn't well known. But I do think among band kids, jazz bands, like I said, played a lot of his music, and I do think he was somebody who was really, really well known. And when you said rock music, I didn't like rock music in high school. I used to beg not to have to go to places like dances because I really didn't like it. But I loved Chuck Mangione and I loved jazz and those kinds of things. So I think now in retrospect, thinking about it, that it was kind of an indication of where I might go in the future.
His older brother is also an accomplished musician, too. I think he's mostly known for playing piano, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I don't know that.
And his whole family, Italian family, I want to say his parents may have been immigrants themselves to America, and part of Rochester's Italian community. And I always thought that he was, maybe he was born there and then went off and did his thing, and then... but no, he was like assigned to that city. Like he was him and his brother, and it's actually a pretty musical city. Like
it is a very musical city. I mean, you have Rochester, Eastman School of Music,
right? Eastman School of Music's there. I know House of Guitars is a famous stopping point for guitar music, rock and roll especially, and things like that. So it's not like it's just some random place that he emerged from. And it seems like though that musicians like him, who introduced something new to the scene. I did a podcast on a few years ago was Dick Dale, who is the pioneer of surf music.
Guitar.
He did the really fast guitar strum. If I'm not mistaken, his family lineage, even though he's Southern California, that's the sound, he had moved there from Lynn, Massachusetts, so he's an East Coast guy. And I think that his family's Lebanese background. And so he is adopting the same kind of musical style that, they didn't use electric guitars, but that was passed down through his family line. So it's actually importing music from, kids in America weren't really listening to Lebanese pop music. But they kind of were, right? And so the same thing with here. Where does the flugelhorn from?
Yeah, I don't know. The name sounds German to me. I don't know.
Some alpine country.
But when it's European, obviously. Other than that, I'm guessing it's something German with the name. But along the same generation, I was recently having a conversation with a young person in her 20s about Sheila E. Yeah. And you're talking about brass instruments. So, I mean, she was a percussionist, but does anybody know Sheila E. today? Where she was also super, along with Gloria Estefan, a little bit later, although Gloria is pretty much the same generation, another outlet for brass players, right? With Latin music. And growing up in the Midwest, Chicago, just up the road, was a huge center for Latin music. So, yeah.
And then the band Chicago incorporates a lot of brass music into
it. Yeah, we used to play a lot of Chicago stuff in high school, too. Yeah.
It's I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because I think that all too often we think that anything associated with, jazz is considered an American art form.
Yeah.
Blues is American.
Yeah.
Country music is American. But then you look at these things, they're actually not. Like, they are...
They aren't, and a lot of the instruments came from other places. So, like the timpani and the tambourine both came from the Middle East. Yeah. They aren't European instruments originally. So, yeah, it's a great way to look at things. Even the guitar is related to the sitar and other instruments throughout Asia. So it's a really interesting way to get kids to look at
the
things.
Bagpipes, which are always assigned to Scotland, are Middle Eastern.
Well, and they occur all over the place, like Spanish traditions of bagpipes, and so they're Galician instruments. So, yeah, all these fascinating. I once saw a pop band from Italy that used bagpipes, Italian bagpipes. It was just amazing.
I love it. And it's like whenever I'm listening to music in my car, it has the little icon of whatever. And like sometimes it's the actual band itself, if they have the images of it. Like if I put on Chuck Mangione, it'd probably have this very recognizable him embracing
with his flugelhorn.
But sometimes if it doesn't know the artist, it'll just say world music, and it just has like this illustration of a guy with some kind of like drums that look like they're from India, and it's just like very generic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but really all music is world music. It's not. Have you ever seen the movie The Alamo, the more recent one? It's actually pretty good. It was came out probably about 20 years ago now. And it depicts, of course, the siege of the Alamo. Mm-hmm. And there's this part that I used to show in my classes sometimes, just to show how, in this case, culture, music gets moved through the globe, where they have, like, the Mexican army has its musicians go to, like, this high point outside the Alamo, and they start playing this drum and brass music, and one of the guys inside the fort goes, "Oh, that's really pretty," and he's like, "It's called like slit throats or something like that," and he's like, "It's an old Moorish song," and I'm like, "Oh, there it is," because the Moors, who had occupied Spain, southern Spain especially, is very Moorish. It's very Islamic, Muslim heritage to it. They must have imported it from them, and then of course Spain colonized all of what is now Mexico, and so these things just pass themselves all the way through. I don't think that song's on the back of Feel So Good. That would probably go against everything that Chuck Mangione is trying to do with that album, but
that's interesting that you mentioned Mexico, because the music of northern Mexico, if you listen to it, it sounds like German Oompa bands, and that's in fact what it was, is the German influence in northern Mexico. So what we know as northern Mexican pop music today actually sounds like German Oompa bands.
Yeah, what is it?
The 3/4-time polka music.
Tejano music is...
Norteño music is really heavily German, and you listen and you're like, that sounds like German, Oompa bands, but it's not. It's
like
Mexican.
Accordions and it's just so much like... So when anybody goes beyond guitar, bass, and drums, they're really entering into a whole new world. And the last thing I want to point out to you on this album on the back, I was looking at this, every single member of the group has like a nickname. Was that something else that, when you were in marching band, did you have nicknames for each other or anything like that? Did you go by?
No. We had our own names. No, I think that's something of the time too, right? I don't know. Well, people today have nicknames too.
I'm kind of looking at this as like maybe because let's see if I can. We have. So even Chuck Mangione has a nickname as Go Mangione, Heber Guzowski, Jailbait Bradley. That's kind of weird. General Grant Geisman. So maybe he's related to USS Grant. Meatman Meeks and Vidalia. He's going by his own last name as his nickname.
Oh, that's
kind of weird guy. So I don't know. Maybe they're trying to kind of put themselves, even though they're playing like soft jazz music. Yeah. It's not abrasive. It's not, tough guy. I mean, maybe they're trying to put themselves in the same category as the rock and rollers by having nicknames for each other. That's my real guess. Yeah. Or maybe trying to appeal to their audience that would have, because that might be like an old big band thing too. Like you'd have like nicknames for the different members of the group. Yeah. Kind of thing.
Who knows? Maybe.
Yeah. Well, were you as sad as I was? I mean, you were probably more sad than I was this summer when Chuck Mangione passed away.
It started a huge nostalgia on Facebook and other social media among my friends because everybody was talking about their memories of Chuck Mangione and their favorite pieces, and people were posting videos and stuff. And I certainly was then going to YouTube and looking up videos. And I don't have a turntable anymore, but I'm pretty sure I still have, I think, 2 of his LPs. So,
well, that one and all your other records that you have are primary sources. They're all documents of time and place. And I really thank you so much for taking the time to talk about good old Chuck Mangione.
Thanks.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.